I position this presentation really thinking about navigating a path to prosperity for suppliers. And I offer these observations not from an arrogant perspective, clearly from a humble perspective, because at Chrysler, you know, we've talked many times about where we were at a couple years ago, and we had this arrogant entitlement type of mentality, and we're clearly not where we need to be in terms of our culture, although we've made great growth in it. So it's much more about how can we collectively bring ourselves together to create opportunities for the supply base. So the observations are based on that. We're seeing a lot of supply-based consolidation, and I think that's a good thing for suppliers. And I've said this many times publicly, we will not establish a target for risk consolidation of the supply base for Chrysler. There will be a natural consolidation as we commonize components, as we use common platforms, and we get synergy with Fiat. Our anticipation is we'll share about 2/3 of the supply base with Fiat going forward. That will create natural consolidation. Our primary objective is to have the best cars and best trucks in the world. That process of sourcing on those components will naturally lead to some consolidation. But I think also the supply base is looking for opportunities. There are acquisitions going on, and they're creating a better value equation for those suppliers. And then lastly, improved customer collaboration. We all got a wake-up call. We were reminded yet again that a large portion of our content comes from the supply base. And you better darn well have a pretty good relationship with them, because if you don't, I'm not sure you can have the best cars and best trucks in the world. You've got to drive that. You've got to have a partnership based upon a lot of different factors, which I'll talk about in a minute. If you do it well, I think you've got great product. If you don't do it well, then you're going to continue to fight. And we learned that lesson. And I keep reminding people, this is about people to people in this industry. It's not about business to business or company to company. And if we take the human side of it, and we're accountable, and we take that advocacy side, I understand your issue, and I'm going to take it on and fix it, then I think you have a leg up on everybody else. If I came to you and said I was going to sell 500,000 Dakotas next year, you would probably question my sanity, right? But if we were talking about the new Dodge C sedan that's based upon the US-wide platform, based upon the Giulietta, which is a great functional performance car, you'd say, okay, I can see where you might get some volume from that. Or the new 8-speed transmission for the 300, which will deliver 31 miles per gallon on the highway. That's a little bit of credibility. But then the next level of credibility I'd ask you to look for is what's the track record of the manufacturer to deliver those numbers. And for Chrysler, I'm not talking about the track record 5 years ago. I'm talking about the track record in 2009, in 2010, and 2011. We hit our number last year. We're going to hit our number this year. And so the forecast accuracy, I think, is critical for you to look at. And then obviously you're going to use companies like IHS, who spend a lot of time really understanding where it is we're going and what we're doing. The great news is we're aligning really well with IHS today in terms of our forecast. And so I think we're starting to build that credibility, but a lot of it comes from transparency and delivering on the numbers. And so you can see what we're forecasting in 2012. We're forecasting between 2.3 and 2.4. And I talked about the products like the C sedan. I talked about the Fiat distribution network and the growth through there. We just started selling the Dodge Journey under the Fiat Fremont name in Latin America. It's doing very well. There's a lot of demand on that. And the 8-speed transmission, which is really a foundational item for fuel economy. And it will deliver great fuel economy. And we started with the 300 and the Charger, and we'll expand it to all of our other products over the next couple years. So there's room for optimism to hit those numbers. I don't think we were smoking dope when we put them together. I think it's based upon solid fundamentals. We just went through a scenario where we had lots of suppliers go bankrupt. We had lots of issues going on. And we found out in our contracts we didn't have the right to use that IP. So if I built a car around an innovation, and something happened to that supplier, I was done. I couldn't use it. So in our terms and conditions, we asked for that right. That's it. Supplier develops the IP, they own it. We develop the IP, we own it. If we develop it together, we share the ownership. It's pretty straightforward, and I think it's fair. But I need to say that because I want to make sure it's really clear. You develop it, you own it, and of course, that's the way it should be. Suppliers who manage their costs well will create opportunities not just for Chrysler, but for other OEMs. coming together, create mutual success. I think we're doing some good things in our side. I will never be arrogant enough to say that we've arrived. In fact, we're not even close. We have 6 quarters of a 20-quarter plan under our belt. The good news is we're staying on our profitability targets, and we'll reaffirm our guidance going forward that we did the other day. But we've got a long ways to go. We got a lot of work done. You know, we've increased our communication with the supply base. We're working on process improvements every day to make ourselves an easier customer to work with. I'd ask you how your process work for your suppliers and how your processes work for the OEMs. We're sourcing decisions based on meritocracy. In the last 2 weeks, I can recall at least 2 areas where we've awarded business to a supplier that cost more. The price was more, but the supplier earned the business because of all of their other metrics. Right? That's a paradigm shift. I understand. But how can I stand here and tell you that we're going to do that if we don't do it? And so we forced that to happen. And then lastly, yesterday, Massimo Risi, who runs our world-class manufacturing process, talked about world-class manufacturing and how we might bring it to the supply base. So we started a little later than I think we'd all like, but we wanted to make sure that we set the manufacturing arena up properly, that we were growing in the manufacturing area, and then once we got some level of expertise, we would start talking with the supply base. So in the 4th quarter, we've picked 5 suppliers that we will do a pilot with. We'll see how that goes, and then we'll roll it out, and probably in the next 3 years, we'll be around a couple hundred suppliers, which is where Fiat is today. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of kinds of questions like, well, how much is it going to cost, which we're still working out, but I will tell you that my objective is to share the cost because I think both of us can benefit. People will say, well, then you're going to add to the productivity targets that we sign up for. Not true. I view this as an enabler to get to the productivity targets that we've already been working on. They're not going to get more. It's an enabler to achieve them. And some people will say, well, it's going to be mandatory. See, all these questions are based upon our past behavior, and we earned it, right? And so now we have to keep reinforcing that we've changed, and we will continue to change. It's not going to be mandatory. The worst thing that we could do is come at it from an arrogant perspective and say that our solution is better than your solution. What we need to do is look at our metrics. If you're on track for your quality metrics, you've got a great system, let's come together, let's talk about it and look at it. If it's there, great, keep going. But in some cases, the supplier needs to develop, and they need to get better on these performances. And so in that case, we'll come together, we'll help, because at the end of the day, not only will you get better for me, but you'll get better for everybody, and you'll create an opportunity for growth for all of your business, which makes you a healthier supplier for not just me, but for everybody else. None of it works without great leadership. None of it works without people to people instead of business to business. The great thing is we're seeing that every day. We're seeing CEOs at suppliers be much more operational than they used to be in the past. We're seeing people being much more accountable than they were in the past. And I can guarantee you on Chrysler's side, we'll continue to walk that path. Not there yet, but we'll stay on that path. The good news is I see the supply base coming along as well.